Good morning, class. Now, let us continue the same topic, the address. From here, I followed the girl along the passage. An old fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. We never used it because it was much more cumbersome. Cumbersome means very heavy than a single candlestick. Won't you sit down? Asked the girl. She held open the door of the living room and I went inside past her. I stopped, horrified. I was in a room I knew and did not know. I found myself in the midst of things I did not want to see again, but which oppressed me in the strange atmosphere, or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged, because of the ugly furniture or the muggy smell that hung there. I don't know, but I scarcely dared to look around me. The girl moved a chair. I sat down and stared at the woolen tablecloth. I rubbed it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing. I followed the lines of the pattern. Somewhere on the edge, there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. My mother, I'll be back soon, said the girl. I have already made tea for her. Will you have a cup? Thank you. Dear students, some meanings are Hanukkah, here the Feast of Lights, a Hebrew festival in December. Cumbersome means unmanageable. Mist means middle. Muggy means humid. Explanation of the above passage is the protagonist means the author followed the girl along the passage. There was a Hanukkah candle holder hung next to a mirror. She remembered that she never used it as it was unmanageable. The girl asked her to sit down as she opened the door for the living room. She stopped and she was disturbed. She was standing in a room which she knew and she didn't. She was standing in the middle of things which she didn't want to see, and they burdened her. Maybe because of the way things were arranged, or the humid smell in the room, or the ugly furniture. She was scared to look at everything. She sat down on a chair which the girl pulled out for her. She looked at the woolen tablecloth. She rubbed it and her fingers felt warm. As she followed the lines of the pattern, she remembered a burn mark that was never repaired. The girl told her that her mother would be back soon and asked if she would like to have a cup of tea. She answered, "Thank you." So, this is the explanation. Further lines from the textbook are I looked up. The girl put cups ready on the tea table. She had a broad back, just like her mother. She poured tea from a white pot. All it had was a gold border on the lid. I remembered she opened a box and took some spoons out. That's a nice box. I heard my own voice. It was a strange voice, as though each sound was different in this room. Oh, you know about them? She had turned round and brought me my tea. She laughed. My mother says it is antique. We have got lots more. She pointed round the room. See for yourself. I had no need to follow her hand. I knew which things she meant. I just looked at the still life over the tea table. As a child, I had always fancied the apple on the pewter plate. We use it for everything, she said. Once we even ate off the plates hanging there on the wall. I wanted to so much, but it wasn't anything special. I had found the burn mark on the tablecloth. The girl looked questioningly at me. Meaning is here pewter plate means plate made of a grey alloy of tin. Explanation of the above lines or above passage is the protagonist looked up. She saw the girl put 2 cups of tea in front of her. She had a broad back just like her mother. She poured tea from the teapot and it had a gold border on the lid. She opened a box and took some spoons out of it. The protagonist complimented the girl about the box. She felt weird hearing her own voice. It was sounding different to her. As the girl turned to give her a cup, she asked if she knew about the box. Then she added that it is antique. According to her mother, she pointed around the room and said that there are more. She told her to see, although the protagonist didn't need to follow her direction. She knew what she was talking about. She glanced over the tea table. She remembered how she used to fancy the apple on the pewter plate. The girl shared that they used the plate for everything. Once they ate off the plates that were hanging on the wall. The girl wanted to eat off that plate too, but it wasn't anything special. The protagonist found the burn mark on the tablecloth. The girl looked at her in a question. So, this is the explanation of the above passage. Further lines from the textbook are yes, I said, you get so used to touching all these lovely things in the house. You hardly look at them anymore. You only notice when something is missing because it has to be repaired or because you have lent it, for example. Again, I heard the unnatural sound of my voice and I went on. I remember my mother once asked me if I would help her polish the silver. It was a very long time ago, and I was probably bored that day, or perhaps I had to stay at home because I was ill. She said, she had never asked me before. I asked her which silver she meant, and she replied, surprised that it was the spoons, forks, and knives, of course. And that was the strange thing. I didn't know the cutlery we ate of every day was silver. The girl laughed again. I bet you don't know it is either. I looked intently at her. What we eat with? She asked. Well, do you know? She hesitated. She walked to the sideboard and wanted to open a drawer. I will look. It is in here. Explanation is the protagonist said yes and told her that when you are so used to touching things into your house, you hardly notice anything. You only notice when something is missing or it needs to be repaired or because you have lent it. She again found her voice to be unnatural. She continued. She told the girl that once her mother asked her if she would help her polish the silver. It was a long time ago and she was bored that day. She had to stay that day. Maybe as she was ill, she asked her mother what silver she is talking about. Her mother said it was the spoons, knives, and forks, but she didn't know that it was silver. The girl laughed and said that she bet she didn't know it was either. With what they are ate with, the protagonist asked if she knew. The girl hesitated and walked to the sideboard and opened a drawer. She said she would see if it was there. Further lines from the textbook are I jumped up. I was forgetting the time. I must catch my train. She had her hand on the drawer. Don't you want to wait for my mother? No, I must go. I walked to the door. The girl pulled the drawer open. I can find my own way. As I walked down the passage, I heard the jingling of the spoons and forks. At the corner of the road, I looked up at the nameplate, Marconi Street, it said. I had been at number 46, the address was correct, but now I didn't want to remember it any more. I wouldn't go back there because the objects that are linked in your memory with the familiar life of farmers times instantly lose their value when served from them. You see them again in strange surroundings. And what should I have done with them in a small rented room where the shred of blackout paper still hung along the windows and no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer? I resolved to forget the address. Of all things I had to forget, that would be the easiest. Resolved means here determined. Jingling means here ringing. Explanation of the above passage is: the protagonist jumped and said she forgot the time as she had to catch the train. The girl asked her if she did not want to wait for her mother. The protagonist still replied with a no and said she must leave. The girl pulled the drawer open. The protagonist said she could find her way out and walked down the passage as she heard the ringing spoon of spoons and forks. When she reached the corner of the road, she looked at the nameplate again. It said Marconi Street, and she was standing at 46. The address was correct, but she didn't want to remember it anymore. She didn't want to go back as the things in there reminded her of memories linked with the familiar life of old times. But they lose the value when you are separated from them and you see them again in a strange environment. She thought of what she would have done with a small rented room where blackout paper hung over the window and no cutlery fitted in the narrow drawer. She finally resolved on forgetting the address as it would be easiest. So, in this way, the chapter comes to an end. Thank you, students.